Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most exciting aspects of anime realms, traits. If you've played the game for a while, you know how important these little power-ups can be. Some traits are a breeze to get, while others are nearly impossible to find, like the mythical ones. But don't worry, we've got you covered. Whether you're deciding whether to keep that rare legendary trait you rolled or re-roll for a better chance, we've ranked all of them to help you make the best choice. Now, I know it can be tough to decide what to do with your traits. Do you keep the one you got, or do you risk it for something even better? It's that classic dilemma of getting something rare, but not knowing if it's the best for your build. That's why we're going to break down the traits from top to bottom so you know what you're working with. So grab a seat, relax, and let's get into the rankings. We'll help you figure out which traits are worth holding onto and which ones might just be better off re-rolled. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking traits in anime realms. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
A very small portion of the audience is subscribed to the channel. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like these types of videos. Thanks.
The traits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, range 1, nimble 1, and superior 1. Alright, let's dive into some of the traits in anime realms that you might want to keep an eye on, especially if you're still figuring things out. So, if you're a beginner, don't get too excited about all the flashy names, because today we're talking about traits that you'll probably want to avoid unless you're just starting your journey. First up, we have range 1. This trait gives your unit a nice 10% boost in range, which might sound cool at first, right? Well, it's decent for units that rely on AoE and range, but honestly, don't go out of your way to prioritize it unless you're working with certain support units or units that have good AoE attacks. There are definitely better traits to invest in later on when you've unlocked more powerful options. Next, let's talk about nimble 1. This trait gives a small 5% boost to Esper, which might not seem like a lot, but it can actually be quite handy for DPS units and supports like Yukiya and Koichi. If you're new to the game, this might help you get a bit more damage output or quicker support abilities, but in the grand scheme, it's not something you'll want to rely on long term as your squad grows stronger. And finally, we've got superior 1, which increases your unit's damage by 10%. While that sounds nice, it's more of a meh trait unless you're running a unit that already has damage. It's great for boosting DPS units, but don't expect this to be a game changer in the long run. Once you start unlocking more powerful traits, you'll realize there are better ways to increase your damage that are way more effective than this small boost. So, to wrap it up, while these traits aren't necessarily bad, they're not the best pick for serious progression. They're perfect for getting your feet wet when you're just starting out, but trust me, you'll want to look for stronger traits as you advance. Keep experimenting, and don't be afraid to test out different combinations to find the perfect setup for your team. The traits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Culling, Golden, Range 2, and Nimble 2. Alright, let's talk about some of the traits in anime realms that are decent but not quite at the top of the food chain. They're useful for a while, but once you start getting the better stuff, you'll probably want to swap them out. So let's dive into these mid-tier traits, starting with something that can really help in a pinch. Culling. Culling is like your trusty sidekick when you're dealing with waves of enemies. It increases your damage against low health enemies, making it a solid choice for clearing mobs. Now, don't expect it to carry you through endgame levels, but it definitely helps with those regular wave clears. It won't hit as hard as some of the top tier traits, but it's consistent, and let's be real, it's pretty satisfying to watch those low health enemies go down faster. Next up, we've got Golden, and I'm all about this one if you like a good boost to your bank account. Golden increases your earnings from farming, which is perfect for anyone who loves to grind for resources. You won't be pulling in as much as you would with some of the higher end traits, but every little bit helps when you're trying to stack up for those expensive upgrades. It's not flashy, but it's super reliable. Then there's Range 2. Now, Range 2 isn't anything crazy, but it gives a nice little bump to your unit's range by 12.9%. If you've got units that rely on AoE or just need a bit more breathing room to do their thing, this one's solid. It's especially handy for support units or anyone who likes to keep their distance while still dealing damage. It's one of those traits you'll appreciate more as you keep using it. Finally, we've got Nimble 2, and this one's a game changer for your DPS units, especially if you've got fast attackers like Yukiya or Koichi. Nimble 2 boosts your unit's SPA by 7.5%, which means they can dish out attacks even quicker. It's not going to break the game, but for those mid-tier units, it's a sweet boost that makes a noticeable difference in speed. Keep in mind though that you'll want to upgrade this trait when you get access to stronger options, so there you have it. A quick rundown of some of the C tier traits in anime realms. They're solid, they get the job done, but don't expect them to carry you through the toughest challenges. As always, make sure to upgrade these when you get the chance and you'll be on your way to higher tier success. The traits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Godspeed, Adept, Range 3, and Superior 2. Alright, let's dive into some of the B tier traits in anime realms and why they can still be pretty solid picks, especially when you're working with what you've got. You know, sometimes you don't always get the perfect trait right off the bat, but that doesn't mean you're stuck with useless options. Let's break it down, shall we? First up, we've got Godspeed. Now, this one is especially great for those units that might be a bit slow on the battlefield. Think of characters like Getu or Yukiya. They can be powerful, but they've got some pretty sluggish attack speeds. That's where Godspeed steps in, bumping up their SPA by 20%. It's a great pick if you're looking to speed things up a bit without having to worry about swapping out your entire unit roster. But if you're rolling in reroll tokens, you might want to aim for something else when you can afford it. Still, it's definitely one of those traits that could turn the tide in certain battles. Next, let's talk about Adept. This one's a bit of a no-brainer for me, especially early on. If you're grinding out those levels, Adept gives you a 50% boost to your XP gain. It's a super efficient way to level up your units, especially if you're trying to max out a character using food. If you roll this early, hold on to it for a while. It's great to get those levels up fast, especially if you want to get your unit to at least level 20. After that, maybe consider a reroll, but Adept is hard to beat in the early stages of the game. Then there's Range 3. This trait increases your unit's range by 15%, and it's decent for a lot of units that already have a solid AoE or are used for support. If you've got someone who's good at dealing with multiple enemies from a distance, this can really help them cover more ground. It's not a game changer, but it's definitely useful if you've got a unit that can take advantage of extra range. Just make sure it pairs well with the rest of your strategy before you lock it in. Finally, let's look at Superior 2. This trait boosts your unit's damage by 12.5%, and while it's not as huge as some of the higher tier traits, it's still pretty solid for your DPS units. If you've got a unit that's there to dish out the damage, this little bump can definitely make a difference. Superior 2 doesn't blow you away, but it's a reliable trait that will get the job done when you don't have a better option available. It's one of those traits you will take when you want more power in the right places, but don't have access to the top tier damage boosts. So yeah, while these B tier traits might not be the flashiest picks out there, they can still really help out when you need them. They're all about making the best of what you've got and filling in the gaps until you get that sweet A tier or S tier trait. Don't overlook them just because they're not the best of the best. They can still be total game changers in the right hands. The traits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Unique, Nimble 3, and Superior 3. Let's dive into some of the traits in anime realms that really make your units shine, without pushing them all the way into S tier madness. Today, we're talking about A tier traits that can still turn the tide of battle, even if they're not quite as crazy as the top tier stuff. First up is Unique. Now, this one's a bit of a double-edged sword. Sure, it boosts your unit's damage by a whopping 300%, which is absolutely massive. On top of that, it gives you a 10% increase in both SPA and range. But here's the kicker. It limits your unit placement to just one on the battlefield. That means, yeah, your unit will be an absolute powerhouse, but you can't stack them up. This trait is perfect for those units that don't have a lot of placements to begin with, but if you've got units with a higher placement count, it might not be the best choice. It's great, but it does require some strategic thinking. Then we've got Nimble 3, which is basically a speed boost for your units. This trait gives a 12% increase to the SPA, which is fantastic for DPS and support units like Yukiya and Koichi. Nimble 3 is one of those traits that's nice to have, but it's not a game changer. It's definitely useful, but don't hold on to it if you've got something better in the reroll pool. If your unit's not worth using reroll tokens on, it's a solid pick to have, but there are always better options out there. Lastly, let's talk about Superior 3. This one's all about damage, specifically a 15% boost to your unit's damage. It's a great trait for DPS units, especially if you're just getting started and want something that's easy to obtain. Superior 3 is a solid, reliable trait for beginners, but if you've got some legendary or mythical units in your arsenal, you'll definitely want to re-roll it. They deserve something a bit more special than just a 15% damage increase. So there you have it. These A tier traits are super solid, but remember, they're not S tier for a reason. Whether you're sticking with Unique for that insane damage boost, or trying to get a bit more speed with Nimble 3, or maybe even taking the reliable damage boost from Superior 3, these traits will definitely help you keep your team strong. Keep an eye out for them, and make sure to mix and match to get the best out of your units. The traits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Celestial, Reaper, Divine, and Sniper. Alright, let's talk about the big guns of anime realms when it comes to traits. These traits aren't just your average boosts, they're game changers, and if you've got them, you're in for a real treat. First up, we've got Celestial. This bad boy gives you a 10% damage and range boost, plus 20% of your damage as true damage. That's right, true damage. This is a total game changer against enemies that laugh in the face of regular damage types. Whether you're tackling bosses or swarming enemies, Celestial has you covered. It's perfect for any DPS unit, and trust me, it'll make those battles feel like a breeze. Just go out there and seek and destroy, no need to worry about what kind of damage you're dealing. Next, let's dive into the Reaper trait. This one increases your damage by 15%, but the real kicker is the extra 25% damage against bosses. If you've got a unit with high boss DPS, say Tojo for example, Reaper is your best friend. It's like having a secret weapon for boss fights. You're going to see those huge health bars drop so much faster. If you're planning on dealing with those big bad bosses that everyone fears, you absolutely want Reaper in your arsenal. Now, moving on to Divine, which might not have the raw damage output that Celestial brings, but don't sleep on it. It boosts your damage and range by 20%, but here's the cherry on top. It also increases your unit's attack speed by 10%, so not only are you hitting harder, you're hitting faster. Divine is a great all-around trait that works wonders, especially for those units that you place in high strategic spots. The extra range and attack speed help you keep up the pressure without worrying about getting overwhelmed. Let's talk about Sniper, a trait that's all about range. It increases your unit's range by a solid 25 font. This trait is perfect for those hill units or anyone who needs to strike from a distance. But here's the thing, while range is always useful, Sniper is often overshadowed by some of the other traits. So, if you've got Sniper, it's worth considering a reroll, especially if you're looking for something that packs a bit more punch. In the end, these S-tier traits are all about giving you that extra edge in your battles. Whether it's Celestial's raw damage potential, Reaper's boss killing power, Divine's versatility, or Sniper's extended reach, each of these traits can make a huge difference depending on your strategy. So, next time you're rolling for traits, keep an eye out for these, because they could turn the tide of battle in your favor. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.